Good morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' Weekly Meeting for Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. Commissioner Plant, any preliminary remarks? Are you ready to approve the consent agenda?
I am ready to approve the consent agenda. Good morning.
Commissioner Gilman,
Morning. I'd also vote to approve the consent agenda.
as would I. Let's jump to item number 2 first, proceeding number 24A-0140E, Public Service Company of Colorado, request for certificate of public convenience and necessity for two very large solar facilities. Ms. Street and Ms. Harper.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with the advisory staff. In this proceeding, Public Service Company of Colorado seeks approval of a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, or CPCN, for the Rocky Mountain Project and the CPCN for the Arroyo 2 project. The Rocky Mountain Project is a 325 megawatt solar plus storage facility, and the Arroyo 2 project is a 335 megawatt solar facility. Both of these generation projects arise from the company's 2021 Electric Resource Plan, or ERP, and Clean Energy Plan, or CEP, in proceeding 21A-0141E. In its CPCN application, Public Service states that it is critical that construction of the Rocky Mountain Solar Plus Storage Facility commences by mid-August 2024 so that the project can meet the December 31st, 2025 commercial operation date. If this commercial operation date is not met, the company explains that important interconnection rights associated with the retired Pueblo Unit 1 coal plant will be lost. I'll also note that because the Rocky Mountain and Arroyo 2 projects arise from the 2021 ERP-CEP proceeding, both of these projects are subject to the Cost to Construct Performance Incentive Mechanism, or PIM, and the operational PIM the Commission established in that proceeding. Just at a high level, these PIMs provide incentives to Public Service if it can construct and operate its generation facilities for less than what it projected in the ERP-CEP proceeding. And likewise, it provides disincentives to the utility if the generation facilities cost more to construct or operate. On Friday, June 7, 2024, in this proceeding, Public Service, trial staff the Commission, and the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, and collectively the settling parties, filed a comprehensive settlement agreement, along with an unopposed motion to approve the comprehensive settlement agreement. The remaining parties, the Colorado Energy Consumers, or CEC, and Climax Molybdenum Company, or Climax, do not oppose but do not join the settlement agreement. And then subsequently, on June 28th, Public Service filed an unopposed motion to admit all pre-filed testimony, attachments, and exhibits. As you know, the central issue before you is whether to approve the unopposed settlement agreement. If it's all right with you, I'll provide a brief summary of the major topics in the settlement agreement before turning it back over to you for discussion on the settlement agreement as a whole.
That'd be great.
Okay, so starting with up first is the treatment of the investment tax credit, or ITC. In its phase 2 bid, the company assumed the storage portion of the Rocky Mountain project would qualify for approximately $110,000 in ITCs. To incorporate this into the cost to construct PIM, the settling parties agree the baseline for the cost to construct PIM should be reduced by the amount of the ITCs the company anticipated receiving when it crafted its phase 2 bid, which is $110 million. The company is also able to make a corresponding deduction from the construction cost of the actual ITC amount it receives, less any associated transaction costs. So just to simplify this, all things being equal, if the company doesn't obtain the ITCs that it anticipated receiving when it crafted its phase 2 bids, then that would result in it being over its construction cost baseline, and it would be at risk for earning a disincentive under the PIM. And then on this ITC issue, the parties also agree the company will flow ITC benefits to customers as a credit through the Electric Commodity Adjustment, or ECA, over a 5-year period. The company will record the interest monthly at its WACC on the difference between one, the actual net realized value of ITCs, and 2, the cumulative amount of ITCs credited through the ECA. This provision of the settlement helps avoid rate volatility by smoothing out the impact of the ITC. Moving on, the 2 generation projects will share a generation interconnection tie line, or GEN tie. The settling parties agree the company will assign the cost of the shared portion of the GEN tie to the project or projects that are in service at the time the shared GEN tie assets are first placed into service. This is consistent with the company's standard accounting practices and procedures. For the next issue, I've already mentioned the cost to construct and operational PIM, but there were questions in this proceeding about whether the company needed additional incentives regarding timing. In the settlement agreement, however, the parties agree that given the impacts that any delays will likely have on the company's financing costs, no additional timing incentive or disincentive mechanism is necessary for the Rocky Mountain and Arroyo 2 projects. And then during this case, certain parties identified an ambiguity regarding when projects that will be recovering costs through the Clean Energy Plan rider, or CEPR, will be rolled into base rates. The settling parties agree that the company will address the timing of this transition in the upcoming CEPR filing that the company will soon file. And then going back to the issue of the PIMs, the settling parties agree the company will file no later than September 30th, 2024, a cost to construct and operational PIM application for all company-owned projects approved in proceeding 21A-0141E. That's the EP proceeding. In this September PIM application, the company will bring forward a proposal to clarify the treatment of curtailments, and the parties will address the proper amortization period for the cost to construct PIM. The settlement agreement also establishes enhanced reporting requirements. Specifically, the company must provide quarterly construction reporting on the Rocky Mountain and Arroyo 2 projects until those projects achieve commercial operation. Following commercial operations, Public Service will provide annual reporting as part of the ERP annual reports. And then lastly, the settlement agreement requires Public Service to address several topics in the upcoming Pueblo Just Transition solicitation. For example, the company must provide an estimate of the employment and tax benefits associated with each project that is proposed in Pueblo County or Route County, and address how employment and tax benefits from the CEP projects offset Just Transition Plan and Community Assistance Plan costs. In addition, Public Service agrees to assess during the Pueblo Just Transition solicitation the company's requirements for an amount of flex and regulating reserves, given the substantial amounts of solar in close proximity. So those are how the main topics are resolved in the settlement agreement. I'll turn it back over to you now for any questions, discussion, or a vote on whether to approve the settlement agreement.
So thank you, Mr. Eden. I just start out saying I agree with the company that it's critically important to take advantage of the replacement interconnect rights at our retiring coal sites in a timely way. So I greatly appreciate the efforts of the company and the parties to work out their differences and allow these 2 projects to move forward in a timely way. So I support the unopposed settlement agreement in all aspects, and would like to see an ABC decision as quickly as reasonably possible. So that's where I'm at. Commissioner Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with you. I support the settlement agreement, and the ABC order sounds great. I do have a couple of issues that are sort of related to the September filing and the way that this has been handled, that I'd like to just get your perspectives on and maybe just throw out there. One of the aspects of this agreement is how the ITC is accounted for in the rates. And the way that they approach this is to take the ITC basically as a kind of a rebate that comes back to customers over the course of 5 years through the ECA. And that seems to me to be a sort of a strange way to handle the ITC, when the ITC is actually used to calculate the price of the power in the bids, as is the PTC when it's being applied. But the ITC is something that comes, upfront as opposed to the PTC, which is accrued over time. And, I would like to see the ITC incorporated into the actual plant cost over time. It seems to me that what we're doing when we give a 5-year, rebate through the ECA is we're basically increasing the price of power for any customer 5 years from now, until the end of the term of the contract. And we're also paying, a rate of return over the entire life of the project for that inflated price that doesn't include the ITC. So it seems to me that, in the September filing, I'd like to get the parties' perspectives on refinancing the cost of the plant in the rate base and including that value of the ITC so that we don't have an artificial increase in the cost of power after 5 years when the actual costs of the project are lower. That's the first issue that's really directly related to this. Again, I don't want to confuse the issue. I support the settlement agreement. But I would like to see that issued, that addressed in September. And the second issue, and this is even farther afield actually from this, but one of the things that strikes me is that we're getting costs in this, in these ERPs for Piesco for a solar facility in Pueblo that are significantly lower than the bids that we're getting for solar facilities in Pueblo with Black Hills. And, I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's because of the number of RFPs that are going out, the amount of power that's being contracted through the RFPs is much higher in Piesco than it is in Black Hills, and maybe more companies want to participate. Maybe it's a fact that this is we're looking at 200 or 300 megawatt facilities versus a 100 megawatt facility. I'm not sure what it is that's driving these costs to be lower for the facilities that are essentially in the same place for one utility versus another. But one of the things that occurred to me when I was looking at this is that if you look at plants like the Craig plant, for example, the Craig coal plant, you've got SRP, Pacificor, Tri-State, Excel, PRPA. They all own plant, but they go in different percentages in order to basically reap the rewards of a reduced cost for a large capital expenditure like that. And it seems to me like we might want to consider similar approaches when we've got utilities that are trying to develop or trying to get bids for solar RFPs or wind RFPs for hundreds of megawatts, but there are different we can get the economies of scale for everybody if we could get joint ownership or joint bidding or whatever it might be to try and make these projects larger so that we can get the savings for both the Piesco customers and the Black Hills customers, as opposed to treating them as separate and distinct projects. I'm not sure what that entails. It just sort of occurred to me and it's entirely, the fact that we're looking at the Black Hills ERP at the same time that this is coming up. And it just sort of occurs to me that we're in different worlds in terms of these bids. And there's got to be ways to capture the savings both for the Piesco customers and the Black Hills customers by maybe doing this a little bit differently.
Well, I just want to say you couldn't have teed up our next discussion any better. And I also have some thoughts to help frame up the September discussion. So just reacting to what you said, we may have to divide it into, two or three separate things, an ABC order approving the settlement agreement, a second order that's TBC, sharing some thoughts or asking some questions prior to the September thing. And then we have to have our separate Black Hills discussion. But I appreciate you pointing out the interaction between the two, because it's something I'm really struggling with too, especially given how high rates are in that Black Hills service territory. So more to come on that. Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to go?
No, that was helpful, Commissioner Plant. I had similar questions and issues in working my way through this, especially kind of the juxtaposition of cost of the bids, and really trying to figure out, isn't there a way? My brain went the same place as yours. I thought, we have joint ownership coal plants. Why are we not able to help to benefit other utilities by getting economies of scale, like with some of the bids we're seeing here? So I'm totally on the same page with you in that. I would love to, have us think more, and especially have the utilities think more, Public Service and Black Hills Electric, on what can we do to help share some of those economies of scale and ensure that all ratepayers can benefit from lower costs in these solicitations. So I had a very similar kind of reaction to you there. Similar, I was a bit confused by the ITC ECA approach at first. I got a bit more comfortable with it, but I think some of this will come down to ensuring that we have the right reporting to understand really how the tax credit was monetized. Was it sold off? Was it used by the company? And was that the most cost-effective route for ratepayers, as we go forward? Some of that feels a little murky to me right now, as far as like, how exactly is this going to be monetized over the next few years? Especially, Mr. Eden, I think, if I'm right, the projects will roll into rate base in the next rate case they file after they're completed. But if let's presume we keep seeing electric rate cases go at, a clip like we've been seeing, the 5 years likely wouldn't be exhausted, right? That they essentially have to use the ITC, and that they intend to kind of carry it forward with this ECA treatment to see how much of it is left. So I think we could end up with a slightly confusing situation where we'll have the rate case and be asking to roll the project into rate base before we really understand what exactly happened with all of the ITC, because of that 5-year time frame. So I think we just need to think hard about what reporting we want to ensure that we understand how it goes this time, and certainly learn from it as we move forward in future ERPs and future CPCNs, to ensure that we can track and understand if basically the most cost-effective route is being followed with the ITC monetization, and understand how, especially in the future, it should be incorporated into the PIMs. I mean, I'm well aware this is kind of our first rodeo here. We're trying to get it as right as we can. But there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of complexities here. So to me, part of the magic sauce this first time will probably just be ensuring that we really have kind of full insight and intelligence into what happened with the ITC, and then we can move forward in future CPCNs with that information. And then just one note on, obviously, I've been kind of the main voice on a timing PIM. So clearly not entirely thrilled we don't have a timing PIM here. I will concede that it does appear the company has a pretty significant incentive themselves to hit the timing, since if they miss it, that's a resource they thought they were going to get to develop that they won't get to develop. I would point out, in that circumstance, ratepayers also lose, because by default, we would essentially be moving to a more expensive resource. So it's not without harm to ratepayers as well, if that's the way it transpires. So in this particular circumstance, it's possible the company has a sufficient enough incentive, but my interest in a timing PIM is in no way dissuaded by it not being part of this settlement agreement. For future CPCNs, for the rest of the items we'll talk about, I'm prepared to accept this settlement agreement as it is before us, but am not so inclined on those less urgent that come before us to completely ignore timing in terms of the incentives or disincentives that we can put on the company to execute the project. So would just add that to the discussion, Chairman.
No, appreciate it. I would just, did you have anything to respond to that, Mr. Eden, before I add my one issue?
Yeah, I would just say that it's a good point that Commissioner Gilman makes, that kind of the learning curve we're experiencing, that we're seeing more of these nuances and details of the PIMs, and particularly how the ITC is incorporated into them. I would just add, however, that the operational PIM doesn't go into effect until after these projects begin operating. And for the Rocky Mountain, which will be the first one, that won't happen until 2026 at the earliest. So there will be time, I think, to continue to look at this and evaluate whether additional reporting is necessary. And I think that perhaps Commissioner Plan's approach, where we require the parties to address our concerns in the September filing, would be appropriate. I still think that would give us plenty of time and allow the commission to look at this issue more holistically.
I appreciate that, and as well as Commissioner Gilman's comments, and with just that one more, as I was thinking about the operational PIM and also reflecting on the Black Hills ERP, I think it'd be good to break out the production PIM and separately, and not try and bundle it into a broader levelized energy cost PIM. So I guess just a question for council and you, Mr. Eden. I think what I'd like to suggest is we just do an ABC order, in the next day or two, approving the settlement, and then maybe do a TBC order with requests about some of the questions and guidance we'd like to provide to the September filing. And maybe we could even bring it back if we can't resolve if it needs further discussion. And any thoughts on that bifurcation?
I'll let Commissioner Council jump in too, but I think that would be possible. I think it's not typical, not something that we typically do, and I think the commission would have to be very careful in that initial ABC decision to say that it is approving the settlement agreement as presented, and that the subsequent decision, the TBC decision, is only going to be providing further guidance to the parties about what's presented in the September 30th final, but it's not going to impact the terms of the settlement agreement.
Correct. The settlement agreement is approved as is in its entirety with no changes. And I mean, it's not even clear how much guidance we'll provide. It may be just more asking questions in the second TBC order. So I don't know, Ms. Harper or Mr. Gomez, Ms. Harper.
I do agree with Mr. Eden that it would be highly unusual to have a follow-on order in this proceeding. I might suggest that we work offline to see if that guidance could be provided in another proceeding, so as not to be stranded, in this proceeding. But I think the concept is there. Perhaps we might need to just do some finessing on the procedure side.
I mean, I don't see another procedure that's going to get in front of us with a record. So I think this is it in a timely way. What's your concern? I mean, I get it. It's unusual, but we don't want to mess up the timing of this project, and it's going to take a while to draft a TBC order. So I don't know.
I hate to suggest an M docket.
There's just no time. It's the filings in September. It's already well underway.
Well, I don't think we have to resolve it right now in this moment. I think, again, the concept is there and we can work with you on the best way to provide that guidance.
I guess Commissioner Plant, Commissioner Gilman, I mean, one thing we can do is just leave it to this conversation. My preference would be for some order. Do you guys have thoughts with your uh, comfort level?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're clear that, all of us are clear that we want to approve the settlement agreement and move that forward. And, what we're trying to address, because this is the first one and because we're going to be dealing with, sort of what is the standard for all the rest of them in the September filing. I don't know if we do it as a supplemental direct for the September filing or, something like that. But I mean, I don't see why this should have any bearing on the agreement that we've just approved. Really, it has to do with what's coming in September. But I'm not a process guy, so I'll leave
Yeah.
it to the people who know that
Yeah,
stuff better than
I
me.
just don't want to mess the timing of the order. Commissioner Gilman, any further thoughts?
No, I mean, yeah, I'm happy to discuss with council. I mean, this might work as a fair warning. It might come up as supplemental direct. When that moves forward, I'm have no comfort that only words here and nothing written will get us anywhere. Being
Based on 4.5 years experience.
the written stuff is difficult to get compliance with sometimes. So what's said, I have a lower level of confidence even. So I think at some point it'll have to be written, whether that's right now or it's, supplemental direct in some future filing. I think that's fine. Happy to talk with Ms. Harper about how that works best. Mr. Eaton, I had one question for you. So these projects too will be included in the September filing as far as operational PIM and like treatment of PTCs and et cetera will all be litigated in that forum, right? For this project,
Yes.
these projects. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to confirm. But yeah, I'm happy to talk with Ms. Harper, but I have every reason to believe at some point this will have to be a written directive, whatever way we can figure out to do it.
All right, so we'll do an ABC decision approving the settlement agreement. We're not going to capture this discussion in that ABC order. We'd ask that you do it as quickly as reasonably possible. I'll work with you, Mr. Eden, and council to see if we can do a second order in this case, bring it back, or leave it till supplemental direct in the September case. So does that give you what you need, Mr. Eden, Ms. Harper? I guess we got one more issue in this case.
Yes, but as I understand it, what you just directed was the commission agreed to approve the settlement agreement without modification, and that will be explained in a forthcoming ABC decision, and then council and I will circle back with you, Chair, later about how best to provide that guidance or the additional discussion to the parties for the September filing.
Yep, and I guess we have one more issue in this case about admitting testimony, Ms. Harper.
Yes, this is just kind of a quick housekeeping matter. As I mentioned at the start, there is a pending motion to admit pre-filed testimony in this proceeding. In the motion, Public Service requests on behalf of itself, staff, and UCA to move to admit all pre-filed testimony, attachments, and exhibits submitted in this proceeding. Public Service notes that the two other parties, CEC and Climax, didn't file any testimony in this proceeding. So I have a recommendation if you'd like.
Ben, your prior thoughts on getting the record and testimony, I would vote to approve that motion. Commissioner Plant?
I vote to approve as well.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
All right, does that give you what you need, Mr. Eden?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Let's move on to proceeding number 22A-0230E, Black Hills, Colorado, Phase 2 Electric Resource and Clean Energy Plan. Mr. Eden? Full day for you, sir.
Yeah, I tried to skip over me at the beginning, but not going to work today. Yeah, so good morning. For this proceeding, I'll be joined by Commission Counsel Alex Acera, as well as Ms. Crandall of your advisory staff. And today I'm going to be teeing up for your deliberations Phase 2 of the 2022 Electric Resource Plan, or ERP, that Black Hills Colorado Electric LLC filed on May 27th, 2022. Black Hills ERP includes a Clean Energy Plan, or CEP, to reduce the company's carbon dioxide emissions by a target of 80% by 2030 as compared to 2005 levels. Before we dive into the decision points, I'd like to provide some context for the public. As you'll recall, in Phase 1 of this proceeding, there was a unanimous comprehensive settlement agreement. On March 22nd, 2023, the Commission issued its Phase 1 decision that approved in part and with modifications the Phase 1 settlement. Among other things, this Phase 1 decision and the Phase 1 settlement set the input assumptions and modeling requirements for Phase 2 and directed Black Hills to initiate an all-source solicitation for new generation resources. The company issued its request for proposals, or RFPs, and received bids to construct various generation resources. Based on the Commission's Phase 1 directives, Black Hills organized the bids into groups or portfolios designed to meet the utility's resource needs and achieve emissions reductions. The company presented these portfolios in the 120-day report that it filed on April 17, 2024. In the 120-day report, Black Hills advances the company's preferred portfolio of generation resources, as well as several other alternative resource portfolios. On May 14, 2024, the Air Pollution Control Division of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or CDPHE, filed its Phase 2 Clean Energy Plan Verification Report. In its verification report, the CDPHE confirms that, with the exception of the two ERP portfolios, all of the Phase 2 portfolios are expected to achieve emissions reductions of 80% or more below the 2005 baseline levels. On May 17th, the independent evaluator, or IE, filed its report in this proceeding. In its report, the IE states that a fair solicitation was conducted, that all bidders had access to the same information at the same time, and that all bids were evaluated using the same criteria and standards. And then on June 3rd, 2024, several interveners filed comments on the 120-day report. And on June 17th, 2024, Black Hills filed its response comments. So turning to some more of the specifics of the 120-day report, Black Hills' preferred portfolio consists of 3 projects: a 150 megawatt power purchase agreement, or PPA, wind project, a 200 megawatt build transfer agreement, or BTA, solar project, and those BTAs are projects where an independent power producer develops and constructs it, but then sells it to the company, and the company ultimately owns that generation resource. And then the third resource is the 50 megawatt BTA battery storage project located in Pueblo County. As I mentioned, the company also provides alternative portfolios. One such alternative, the CEP portfolio, is essentially the same as a preferred portfolio, but it replaces the company's preferred storage project with another storage project of the same size. In the local economic development portfolio, the wind project is replaced with a 100 megawatt solar project. The company estimates that for the preferred portfolio that has a present value cost of $1.3 billion, another $167 million when accounting for social costs of carbon, for a total of approximately $1.5 billion. There are several decision points to discuss, but before we jump into those, I'll pause for any preliminary comments or questions from the Commission.
Yeah, I have some preliminary comments I'd like to share. As I understand it, Black Hills has some of the highest electric rates in Colorado, while serving a community that has virtually no demand growth and a median income that is maybe 60% of the state average. At the same time, Black Hills is currently asking us to approve a 20% revenue requirement and rate increase in a separate process. Given this background and context, I was really disappointed and frustrated by several core elements of Black Hills' preferred plan in terms of lack of sensitivity to customer rate impacts, and really creativity, as Commissioner Plant pointed out, in trying to manage down these impacts. For example, the wind bid and the preferred plan involve what I would view as exorbitant wheeling charges and ultimately large customer rate impacts. Similarly, I have concerns with the cost, risk sharing, and rate impacts of the proposed solar acquisitions. So, including the backup ones. So I'd just say that I'm struggling with this decision and may want to request more analysis and a multi-step deliberation, including trying to ask questions like the one Commissioner Plant raised in the prior discussion. So really curious to hear your views of this and what you guys are thinking. So with that, Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I had a lot of the same feelings. I feel like this is just for some reason completely out of whack. And yeah, I mean, I would echo your comments. I think that, you know, a 20% almost increase in rates in an area that is already number one experiencing the highest, some of the highest rates in the state, and number two has some of the lowest income in the state, is just it's unconscionable. And I'm just not sure. I'm not sure that the utility is really taking advantage of the various different options available to try and proactively try and reduce costs for the customers. And so it is a disturbing filing as far as I was concerned.
Commissioner Goman, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, I mean, it would be ideal to be sitting here with better options in front of us. So essentially a very small pool of bidders and bids that are significantly higher than what we see for other utilities. So it's difficult. I certainly wish and hope that there would be a way to find an approach that lowers the cost of these resources and the acquisitions, especially in this area. But I agree with you. I think some sensitivity around what rates already are in that area, and how we can strike the right balance is of a lot of interest to me as well.
All right, Mr. Eden, you want to jump into the specifics and we'll see if we can find a path forward?
Sure. So we'll start with a few of the decision points regarding the actual generation resources that would be included in a portfolio. As I mentioned earlier, the company's preferred portfolio contains a 150 megawatt wind project, bid 248-02. In their comments, the Colorado Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, Pueblo County, and Canyon City all recommend removing bid 248-02 due to its high cost relative to other available solar projects. Staff similarly argues that replacing the wind project with a solar project appears to be less expensive, has incremental benefits for local communities, and eliminates the capacity shortfall in 2027. Staff acknowledges, however, that doing this is projected to increase emissions somewhat. In its response, the company acknowledges that bid 248-02's direct cost is greater than some of the solar projects, but argues that the wind project lowers emissions and reduces social costs. The company specifically asserts that wind energy that is available at night allows existing natural gas generation to be dispatched down to avoid fuel costs and greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, Black Hills argues that the wind bid reduces the company's risks regarding solar and storage tariffs and potential supply chains disruptions. So the first decision point I recommend discussing is whether Black Hills should pursue a portfolio of resources with the identified wind project, or whether it should be replaced with a solar project.
Or a third option. Given my concerns over rate impacts, I probably would follow the requests of Pueblo County, Canyon City, and UCA, and would not approve this wind PPA. Although the PPA price looks reasonable, as I said before, I view the wheeling costs as exorbitant, as they add by themselves as much as 7% to the total Black Hills annual revenue requirement and rates, just the wheeling costs. In general, I was convinced by the Black Hills analysis in the phase 2 report and in a series of discovery responses to CIEA in the phase 1 process that these wheeling costs are not avoidable under the status quo approach to purchasing firm transmission. At the same time, given the magnitude of these costs, as well as the economic and environmental benefits of the underlying bid, ideally, we'd have more information from the company before making our decision on this proposed project. More specifically, I'd want to know if it's possible that Tri-State's entry into the SPP RTO West market or Excel's entry into the SPP Markets Plus Day Ahead market could eliminate these wheeling charges over time. I'd also like to understand the answers to Commissioner Plant's thoughts about joint ownership and joint participation benefits. I saw nothing in the record, exploring that possibility. Ultimately, as a state, we'll need to find a market structure that eliminates these pancaking of transmission rates, particularly within Colorado. If we decide today to approve a specific portfolio which doesn't include any wind projects, then perhaps this concern is moot. However, if we want to take a harder look at these types of questions before approving a specific portfolio, then we may want an answer to this question and Commissioner Plant's question. So again, curious to see where you guys are at, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely in the same place as it relates to the wind project. I thought the wheeling charges were, exorbitant, and so I would, not approve that project, and we'll talk about, I think, other portfolios that might be advantageous. I also was curious about, and Mr. Chairman, you might have some insights on this. As we're looking at, I know we're not in the regional, arrangement right now, but we see that, certainly within the life of the projects that we're trying to evaluate here. SPP is a very wind-heavy region. And I mean, not to state the obvious. I just wonder, I'm very much in favor of, sort of a variation in resources that are, feeding into a system and a diversity in those resources. But it seems to me that, expansion into SPP may give us that kind of diversity of resources, whereas, one of the unique characteristics of, the Black Hills area, the Pueblo area, is an incredible solar resource. I think that, while we're not in that kind of a regional arrangement currently, I'm kind of trying to, consider these, multi-year arrangements that we're getting into within that context without having a firm understanding of how that's going to be constructed. You understand the wheeling charges much better than I do, and I would imagine that, it's some sort of a SPP regional agreement would, obviously include being able to get the power to the demand. So, yeah, I agree with you in rejection of the wind bid.
I have more questions than answers at this point. Commissioner Gelman, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, I agree with the two of you. It seems in this particular circumstance, although the wind bid does provide, at least what they show to be enhanced environmental benefits, it does so at a really a cost that I don't think we should sign up Black Hills Electric ratepayers to pay for. Especially, as I think each of you have noted, with the market dynamics set to change relatively soon, the possibility that they have access to increasing amounts of low-cost renewables, including wind, or that really the cost of moving these electrons would be significantly changed in the future. Seems like a particularly fraught time to be approving, high wheeling charges on this particular project when everything could change and they could have much better options in the relative near future. It just doesn't seem like a good choice to make. You know, and look, it's all well and good when a utility can exceed the statutory greenhouse gas targets in a cost-effective way. But that's not what this would look like. You know, and portfolios that don't include this bid that ends up, you know, significantly more expensive because of those wheeling charges. Portfolios that don't include it already meet and exceed the statutory greenhouse gas target. So it's just not necessary to, you know, require Black Hills Electric customers to bear the burden of far exceeding it for a cost that's not cost effective, you know, I think for that incremental improvement, unfortunately, in this circumstance.
Mr. Eden, you want to jump to some of the solar discussions?
The preferred portfolio, the CEP portfolio, and the local economic development portfolio all contain a 200 megawatt BTA solar project. This is bid 11405A. The local economic development portfolio keeps this bid 11405A and also replaces the wind bid with a PPA solar resource, bid 24801. UCA and Pueblo County argue that instead of replacing the wind project with bid 24801, the Commission should amend the local economic development portfolio to include an alternative solar project, bid 33403, a 150 megawatt PPA. UCA argues that Black Hills unnecessarily adds transmission costs to bid 33403, but that once these transmission costs are removed, this bid is by far the lowest cost solar bid. Instead of the company's transmission approach, UCA recommends that the company treat the existing transmission as a gen tie, and that if the transmission line trips, then the solar project is also tripped so that it does not overload the remaining transmission. Black Hills opposes the request from UCA and Pueblo County to use bid 33403 as an alternative to the wind project. Black Hills argues the company was intentional in identifying necessary transmission system upgrades so as to avoid later transmission cost surprises. Black Hills asserts that removing these transmission costs for just bid 33403, as UCA argues, would be discriminatory to all other bids that were modeled with the estimated transmission upgrade costs. And so here I'll open it up for your discussion on the solar projects included in the various portfolios and whether the Commission should consider alternative solar projects.
I'll jump in first again. I understand that the parties by and large supported within either the preferred plan or the local economic development portfolio the inclusion of bid 114-05A, as Mr. Eden said, a 200 megawatt build transfer solar project located in Pueblo County. But I did have three concerns with that bid, as well as the offtake solar project that people are looking at to replace the wind bid that I'd like to raise for discussion with you guys. First, the construction costs of Black Hills preferred project compared to, for example, bid 248-09, a similar 150 megawatt build transfer project, were much higher on a $1 per megawatt basis. As I understand it, Black Hills has a current proposed rate base of roughly $700 million. And this single project selected by Black Hills, costing hundreds of millions of dollars, would by itself be an enormous increase, in the 40 to 50% range to the future Black Hills rate base. Second, I share UCA's concern that the company did not fully consider the potential for allowing some level of individual project curtailment and just added substantial transmission costs in ways that made a number of offtake bids clearly economic. It may be that allowing some level of curtailment and avoiding the new transmission would make these cheaper offtake bids viable. Third, I have a concern with the estimated net capacity factors. When I look at the bids in Appendix A, it seems like the production estimates for the build transfer bids, where customers are likely to bear the risk if the estimate is wrong, are materially higher than the production estimates in the PPA bids, where the developer bears the risk of a forecasting error. Intuitively, solar projects located in the same general area should have very similar production estimates. Overall, I'm concerned that Black Hills may not be pursuing the best solar options and that the result may be significant customer rate impacts, particularly past 2030. This concern, as Commissioner Plant pointed out, is exacerbated when we look at the winning bids in both the public service and tri-state processes, as both the solar options being pursued by Black Hills are significantly more expensive than these other winning bids. Even within the Black Hills process, there were 4 solar PPA bids that had materially lower costs than the Black Hills solar ownership proposal that were excluded because of transmission adders or for reasons that are unclear. And I would point to bids 248.12, 334.03, 341.02, and 341.04, as well as one build transfer bid 248-09. One of the statutory public interest findings for approving a CEP is whether it result in reasonable cost to customers. Without more information, I'm not sure I'm comfortable finding that the cost Black Hills customers will be reasonable. So one path forward would be to delay approving any solar bids in this case today and request additional information and analysis from Black Hills, say in 2 weeks. These requests could involve the submission of further detailed information on bid 248.09, which looks to me like it would be significantly cheaper solar build transfer option as compared to the one the company selected. This 248.09 is smaller, has a much lower construction cost on $1 per megawatt basis, and it appears that the company may have mistakenly lowered production in ways that may have overstated the bid's levelized price. I'm also confused about bid 248.12 as it appears cheaper than the project selected by the utility and doesn't involve new transmission. So more information on that would also be helpful. We might also request that the 4 solar offtake bids that appear to be cheaper than the build transfer project and way cheaper than the potential solar offtake project, that Black Hills provide estimates of the likely curtailment and when it's being curtailed if new transmission was not built. This should be accompanied by revised annual transmission payments that reflect the customer costs for interconnecting the project, but do not include the cost of transmission upgrades necessary to provide constant firm transmission service. As UCA suggests, and as Public Service found in its ERP, allowing for some curtailment in ways that avoid new transmission may be the best path forward. I think this approach also solves the concerns Black Hills had about, discriminating in favor of one project as we're asking for it for multiple projects. Likewise, instead of relying on production estimates from build transfer bidders that don't bear any consequences if their forecasts are wrong, we could ask Black Hills to provide for informational purposes an additional column of levelized price calculations for all available solar bids, assuming all projects are located in similar areas, had the same net capacity factor unless there was a specific reason for the difference. Finally, I'd like to see comprehensive all-in revenue requirement and rate impact analyses through 2040 associated with a preferred plan, the CEP, the local economic development portfolio, and a portfolio where the utility simply fills any resource need with seasonal market purchases. At the end of the day, I'm really concerned about the long-term rate impacts of our decision here and would request that Black Hills further explore and quickly, particularly through allowing some curtailment of the cheaper PPA projects, providing us with a portfolio of projects that hit the emission reduction targets, but at prices and customer rate impacts that are significantly closer to the lower cost BPA bids in the Black Hills process and the levels that PSCO and Tri-State achieved. To me, it seems like this may be possible given a reconsideration of production, construction, curtailment, and transmission issues. So I guess the request is a response from Black Hills providing further information, some answers to questions in a very short time period before making a decision to approve any portfolio. Commissioner Plant, sorry for the I drive in detail.
No, I appreciate it.
Exactly.
I thought that was excellent. And just one point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. So you're asking for Black Hills to do an evaluation of the preferred plan and CEP that include the wind bid, but we've already voted to not include that in the approved portfolio. So do you want?
I guess they can not move forward with that piece of it for the rate impact analysis. I didn't know if I had another vote when I started laying this out.
Yeah, and no, I agree with you in that evaluation, and as we've also said, I think working with public service to see if there's a possibility of an expansion of any of the projects that they've already received bids on, could lead to an incredible savings for Black Hills customers if that's an option, and I'd like to see them pursue that as a possibility. And one thing I would point out, I have nothing to add to what you laid out. I think it's a great approach. One thing that I would point out is that the local economic development portfolio of resources, I think what we're bothered by here is not necessarily the actual resource mix, but the cost of the resource mix. And some of the calculations that go into determining that cost. But I just wanted to point out that the local economic development portfolio, which doesn't include the wind bid, and as they said, wind reduces the running of the natural gas, to a certain extent, and so you get a higher emissions impact. Yet the local economic development plan actually achieves 82% reduction, so it exceeds the 80% reduction that the statute contemplates. And I just want to make sure that is out there. While we're not, maybe achieving 89%, we're still exceeding the 80% with the resources that we're discussing here. And I think the evaluation got to 82% with that mix. And I'd also say that, well, I mean, as we go forward, inclusion of energy storage could actually also contribute to a reduction of that natural gas running and further reduce the emissions in the future. So anyway, that's all I had to add to your comments, and I support your
Appreciate it. Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, well, I guess starting on the transmission issues and transmission interconnect issues, I mean, I kind of continue to have a broader concern here. I think we've made great strides in trying to get essentially our incumbent utilities to be on somewhat more equal footing with bidders, with the inclusion of PIMs like we've discussed here, as well as in public service companies, to ensure that what's bid is actually the price ratepayers are going to see if we picked that resource. Transmission and kind of the interconnection feels like the missing piece that is still somewhat problematic here, right? I mean, we have the incumbent utility as essentially the only party saying, well, this is what's necessary and this is what it will cost for these particular resources. And so there's still just an enormous opportunity to put their thumb on the scale. And I'm not confident that is what's going on, but I don't know, and that's a problem. I don't know, right? So there's a bit of a black box thing that seems to happen once the bids come in with regard to what the interconnection costs will be. And unfortunately, it is an opportunity for utilities to influence what comes out on top. And there doesn't really seem to be any incentive to manage down the costs of those interconnections on the utility side, of course, unless it's their resource potentially. So that just remains a piece. I would love to find the breakthrough, to find how we can get better in this area. I know we've talked kind of in public services, the ERP, about bringing in transmission kind of planners or someone to oversee. The exact terminology we used is escaping me. But, how can we ensure that, A, this is the most kind of honest process in terms of what costs are being attributed to what bids, but also that we're managing down those prices, and not inflating them, not making them, because that's not necessarily the natural incentive of a public utility. So that just remains like a real concern to me in this process, not just for this utility, but how do we ensure that that piece of it is working best for ratepayers? So just as a general concern, any ideas, any improvements we can make as we continue on, I think, what is a never-ending path of ERPs moving forward.
I'd just say we've made a lot of progress with trial staff and other interveners being able to run Encompass, but we got to find access to real expertise that can help us on load flow studies and unit curtailment. I mean, the transmission knocked out 4 or 5 offtake bids that were the cheapest. The 4 or 5 cheapest bids were knocked out on transmission grounds with no data on their curtailment or what the costs were of not building that transmission. So, and the transmission costs are, $100 million plus on a 100 megawatt or 200 megawatt project. So I couldn't agree more and appreciate how you said it.
And I think to the extent that we are also in part suffering, particularly in Black Hills Electric territory, from a lack of bidders and interest in bidding here, ensuring that this process looks and feels as transparent as possible as far as how additional costs are assessed to your project is really essential. We need more bidders here. We need, perhaps this is part of a concern of confidence in the process if we're not seeing enough bidders. And so this piece I'd really love to make some progress on for sure. But I appreciate your specifics on the different solar projects, and I would be supportive of getting additional information as you laid out.
And maybe we can include some language flagging Commissioner Gilman's concern, which I totally share. Do you want to know anything else on this, Mr. Eden, or you want to jump to the storage?
Yeah, I have one follow-up question. I understand it's a 3-0 vote to require Black Hills to provide the additional information that you laid out, Chair, regarding the solar bids in 2 weeks. And I'm assuming that's 2 weeks from the date of the decision that will be issued. And then also, I wanted to circle back with the question you posed in the first decision point regarding the wheeling fees and what happens in future markets. Is that going to be included in the information that we want the company to provide in 2 weeks?
And I'd also like to include Commissioner Plant's question about why they're not looking. Have they talked to Excel and Tri-State about joint ownership or joint participation in offtake? I mean, it's given the gap between the Black Hills bid and Tri-State and Excel. I mean, it seems like there's enormous room to make it profitable for both Tri-State and Excel to have joint participation. So I'd also ask Commissioner Plant's question, and I'd also ask Commissioner Gilman's question about more detail about how they allocate transmission costs and why the cheaper bids always seem to get knocked out.
Okay, so perhaps Commissioner Plant's question about whether they've explored joint ownership, and then raising Commissioner Gilman's concerns about just providing more details about how they calculate transmission costs for the various projects. Okay. Yeah, I think that gives me what I need, and I think given that the commission is requiring additional information from Black Hills, I think it does make sense to still address the location of the storage bid. So we'll jump to that topic. So even though the commission has decided to defer selecting a particular resource portfolio today, I think it still makes sense to discuss this decision point. And this is the location of the storage project that comes up in almost all of the main portfolios. Specifically, the main portfolios include this 50 megawatt storage project. In the CEP portfolio and the local economic development portfolio, the 50 megawatt storage project is bid 24501. In the preferred portfolio, however, the company advances a different storage bid 24819. For reasons the company has marked as highly confidential, staff, UCA, and Pueblo County recommend bid 24501 as the primary storage bid and bid 24819 as the backup storage bid. In its response comments, Black Hills states that it does not oppose reordering these bids such that bid 24501 is the primary storage bid and bid 24819 is the backup bid, but the company prefers to maintain its preferred location. And unfortunately, the company has marked as highly confidential the differences between these two storage bids and the reasons for the preferred location. Advisors recommend the commission provide guidance regarding the consideration of these storage bids. I have a recommendation, but I'll pause first for your discussion.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't think Black Hills really justified the importance of its preferred location for the storage bid. However, if the company can get a similar or cheaper bid for a storage project located at the preferred location, that worked for me. So I'd give the company some flexibility to negotiate with the bidders of both 24501 and bid 24819 and use whatever bid is not selected as the backup. But I'd let them try and work that out. I don't know, Commissioner Plant, would you say that different or any guidance?
No, I mean, I would support having 01 as the preferred bid just because it was less expensive. I didn't understand at all how the location, sort of factored into all this. And if they want to move it to their preferred location, as you said, Mr. Chairman, I'm completely supportive of that, but the cost of the 01 was, substantially lower than the other. So I would prefer to keep the 01 bid as the preferred bid with the other as the backup, and let them try and work out the location in whatever way it works out best for them.
Yeah, I tend to agree with both of you. I didn't really understand or see the compelling reason it needs to move, but if the company so chooses to try and negotiate on 24501 to move it, and there is not an impact to the timing or the cost of the delivery of the resource, I have no opposition to doing that, as I don't see the downside for ratepayers in that, but I wouldn't think it's smart to do that if we would incur some additional cost or delay, because I don't think the reason's been really thoroughly justified in order to get to that. And the one thing I would add on this, with these highly confidential reasons we prefer one location, which I don't even think really probably made a compelling case for those able to read it. I have very little to no patience with the kind of only utility understood reasons for preferring certain locations that are not disclosed to bidders and other people in phase one of the process. This isn't the first time we've seen that, and it in no way benefits the process. If there are real reasons, let's make sure that's disclosed in phase one of these proceedings so that all bidders understand. If there are resource needs, preferred locations, whatever, to the extent we continue to see these come up in phase twos of ERPs, I got no patience for that circumstance.
Does that give you what you need, Mr. Eden?
Yes. The next topic I would present is the backup bids. In the 120-day report, the company proposes backup bids for each project proposed in the preferred portfolio: the wind project, the solar project, and the storage project. The company explains that if a preferred bid fails, the company could replace it with a recommended backup bid. The company proposes one 100 megawatt PPA solar bid as a backup to the 150 megawatt wind project in the preferred plan. Black Hills proposes 3 BTA solar bids that together comprise 2 alternatives to the 200 megawatt BTA solar facility. And then finally, the company has identified one backup battery storage bid, and this is bid 24501. And based on the discussions you all just had, this would now be the preferred storage project. Staff is not supportive of the backup bids proposed by the company. Staff argues Black Hills was supposed to identify 3 backup bids in each technology, but failed to do so. In addition, staff notes the company only identifies BTA solar backups despite the availability of lower cost PPA bids. Staff suggests alternative backup bids and recommends that if an approved solar project fails, the company should be required to make a filing explaining its selection of an alternative backup project. Parties should have 30 days to file a protest regarding a company's backup selection. Staff similarly suggests approving an additional storage bid as a backup project, bid 200-01A. And then CIEA suggests that the commission direct the company to add PPA projects to the solar and storage backups. CIEA argues that having more PPA projects ready to compete could enhance IPP ownership. So the decision point before you is whether to approve Black Hills identified backup bids and addressing staff and CIEA's arguments. You can provide a recommendation if you'd like, but I'll pause first for your discussion.
Yeah, for me, in the prior Black Hills ERP, the company had access to multiple utility scale solar offtake projects at maybe half the cost of the utility owned generation that it is included in the preferred plan in this case, but was unable to execute on that opportunity. Given our rate impacts concerns and that it's not great to have the company profit from its inability to execute in the prior case, I'm fine and would like to rely on the most economic backup bids and not limit it solely to self-owned projects at these costs. So I would not allow the much higher build transfer bids as backup and would require the utility to use the most cost-effective bids as backup. I'd also say the phase 1 settlement agreement contemplates that Black Hills will identify the 3 most competitive bids by technology type to be backup. As staff notes in its comments, however, the company doesn't really do this. Since we're already directing Black Hills to provide additional information, I would direct that the company include the 3 most competitive bids by technology type, regardless of ownership, especially after we see what the bids are without the transmission costs. So that's where I'm at. Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I'm in a similar place. I think the selection of bids needs to be determined by the cost to the ratepayers, not the ownership or and also I would also add sort of the in-service dates. I found a real disconnect between some of the preferred backup bids and when they could come online in comparison to the projects that they were backing up. Some as long as 2 years after. I'm not sure how that fits into their evaluation of their portfolios. But it just seems like there needs to be a prioritization of the lower cost to the consumer and less of a concern around the ownership structure. And however way they get to that low cost to the consumer is good by me.
Commissioner Gutman.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with each of you. And in addition, Chairman, I'm not sure. I don't think I heard you say this, but I think staff additionally had a recommendation that if a solar project fails, Black Hills should have to make a filing to explain its selection. And then staff would have essentially, or any of the parties would have protest rights to challenge that selection. So if you said that, I'm sorry. If you didn't, I add a friendly amendment to also adopt that staff recommendation for a backup process so it can be as transparent and fair as possible.
I support that as well. Do you, Commissioner Plant?
I do as well.
Just a couple of clarifying points, if I could. Because the earlier discussion, it sounds like the commission is leaning away from the wind bid, although that might be in flux after we get more information about the actual bid. So I was curious whether the commission wanted Black Hills to identify three backups for wind projects, or whether that's moot because the commission has decided to not include wind.
I mean, if there was a way to get wind closer to the bid price, that'd be great. But you can't like raise rates by 7% to pay for wheeling charges. And as I understood it, every wind bid required wheeling. So if there was somehow, if in response to our questions, they found a way to get a competitive wind bid, that'd be great. So I don't know, does that give you what you need, Mr. Eden?
I think so. Just kind of lead it back to the company. If they think that the bid prices for wind can be substantially reduced based on this new analysis, go ahead and provide three backups for wind. If those bid prices aren't going to change much, then they only need to provide three backups for solar and three backups for storage. And then also, it was, I think, implicit from your all discussion, but I just wanted to make it the express point, CIEA's argument about forcing PPA into the backup pool. And what I heard was that the commission is interested in the most cost competitive backup bids, regardless of ownership, and so would be denying CIEA's argument, but I wanted to be clear.
I think that's right. Commissioner Plant,
Yes.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yes.
Okay, I think that gives me what I need on the backup bids. So there's several additional decision points. However, I think with the decision today to delay the selection of a preferred portfolio, it might make sense to skip over some of those. I think the one other thing, I guess the two other things I would add is advisors would suggest that the commission address the 90-day deadline for the phase 2 decision and whether to waive that. And then also CIEA makes a few requests regarding additional information. And now that the commission is already requiring the company to provide more additional information on other topics, whether the commission should entertain CIA's request at today's meeting. Happy to present either one of those if the commission is interested.
I support waiving the 90-day deadline. I think the 90 days is July 16th, and I don't think we're going to hit that. So on the waiver deadline, you're okay waiving that, Commissioner Plant?
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yes.
Do you want to present the CIA
Sure, I'd be
request?
happy to. So CIEA argues that Black Hills does not explain the breakdown by PPA versus utility ownership with respect to the number of bids that were advanced to computer modeling. And thus, the commission does not know whether the modeling was biased against PPAs. CIA thus recommends the commission direct Black Hills to present the data of the breakdown of ownership versus PPA bids that were advanced to computer modeling. In addition, CIA suggests that the utility-owned projects might be relying on overly optimistic assumptions regarding how easily Black Hills can transfer PTCs or production tax credits. CIEA recommends the commission require a detailed explanation from the company as to its assumptions on PTC transfers, not only for this phase 2, but to present the assumptions for a robust vetting process in any upcoming ERPs. Black Hills doesn't respond expressly to either of these requests. So I have a recommendation, but I'll pause for your discussion.
Yeah, if you can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Because the commission is already requiring Black Hills to provide additional information regarding the phase 2 modeling, advisors recommend the commission grant these requests from CIEA and also require the company to provide data regarding the utility ownership versus PPA bids that were advanced to computer modeling and the assumptions for transferring or monetizing the available tax credits. And advisors would include PTCs and ITCs in this analysis.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I. Anything else on this, Mr. Eden?
No, like I said, I think at this point, given the direction the commission is heading, I think that should be sufficient for today, although I'm happy to discuss or present other topics if the commission has particular interest in addressing those today.
I don't. Commissioner Plant,
No.
Commissioner Gilman?
No, but maybe just a few thoughts on additional issues, which we'll probably hear at the next deliberation, just so you all are aware. Nothing earth shattering, but perhaps some frustrations on my part. So the commission had ordered in the phase 1 decision, Black Hills Electric to provide kind of an analysis and information on the potential for a correlated outage at the PAGS Pueblo generating station. So my understanding, we provided 12 months, which would have been up in March, and have not seen that information. So I find that fairly disturbing. I think what the commission was trying to understand is the risk associated with generation at that facility, and it would be certainly ideal for the commission to understand that. So I don't think it has essentially direct bearing on this phase 2 decision, but just wanted to express that that was expected already, has not been seen yet by a pretty fair margin. Consider it late versus what the commission ordered and was expecting. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, and again, I don't think there's action right now, but maybe something for us to think about with regard to both the BVEM best value employment metrics, as well as equity considerations, or essentially the non-economic considerations of bids. Most of that information, if not all, has been marked as confidential or highly confidential, which I think just makes the discussion of it and the transparency around how it was considered particularly difficult. So more just a consideration for future ERPs. Clearly, the legislature intends us to be able to consider those issues in making decisions. And I think an important part of that is kind of the transparency and discussion of those issues, how they fare against each other, and how they have bearing on our decisions, which is particularly difficult to do when it's all marked as confidential. So I think just something that we need to consider for future ERPs and strive to improve, particularly with kind of help from the utilities on being much more maybe thoughtful about what really needs to be considered confidential there, so that we can have, I think, the sort of transparent discussions on that information that, I anticipate was the goal of including those in considerations in the first place.
So it sounds like you're not asking to include it in this ABC order, but maybe we can put a pin in it and put it in the final order in this case.
Yeah, improvements for next processes. Those are just a few things I wanted to flag for you that I was thinking, because I guess it's nice that the utility collects the information and then they provide it to us, but if there is no public forum to actually discuss how it's considered or how we're making decisions based on it, I just question if that really meets the intent. So I think we should send some messages for our future ERPs to ensure that we can have that be more transparent in the future.
So let's take a formal vote on that. I would vote to include that concern in the final order in this case and share it. Would that be okay with you, Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, it would. I mean, one other thing that you brought up, the BVEM, and one of the other things that I was thinking about with respect to BVEM is that it's, the way that it's sort of defined and how it's calculated, it looks at Colorado jobs, which, obviously we're interested in the state, but, this is a pretty concentrated service territory, and so the impact of local jobs, I think it has a much greater impact in the employment metric, really, but it doesn't get measured because the BVEM, as it's defined in statute, really looks at the entire state. And, that works for a utility like Excel where it's, serving the entire state, but the Black Hills territory is a much more focused area, and yet they don't, benefit from an analysis that looks at that local impact. And so we kind of lose that. I don't know how that gets acknowledged or accounted for, but I just wanted to bring that up as something that occurred to me as I was reading through the BBEM evaluations. But I would support your proposal as well.
Yeah, and
Commissioner-
there may be more to discuss later on it. So I don't care one way or another if we take a formal vote on it today. I just as a heads up to you all, I think nothing earth shattering here, but just wanted you all to be thinking of that for our next discussion.
Appreciate it. So I guess, Mr. Eden, do you have everything you need for hopefully a relatively quick ABC order? We got to get bidders clarity as soon as we possibly can. Anything else you need from us? I'll send you my script and notes.
No, I do believe we have what we need for today's discussion to issue an ABC decision with the understanding that step 2 of the commission's deliberations will occur after we receive that additional information from Black Hills.
Cool. Anything else on this one, Mr. Eden?
No, not at this time.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Plant, anything before we adjourn?
Nope.
Commissioner Gellman?
Nothing additional, thanks.
Thanks all. We're adjourned.